We're a group of Gen Xers who became aware of our neurodiversity later in life. Join us as we share stories, interesting topics, and talk to special guests. Welcome to Season 2 of This Is How My Brain Works.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of This Is How My Brain Works. I'm Sarah Hines. I am joined by Krista Gano and Michael Collins, where we're going to talk a little bit about childhood behaviors. So I'll show you yours. I'll show you mine if you show me yours. Krista?
Why do I have to be the person to go first?
Well, because I think that you might have some childhood behaviors that in retrospect, or moments that in retrospect, had you known you were neurodivergent and had some of those tools, it might have gone differently.
So, well, it's interesting. I was watching, something came along on TikTok, so y'all know how I love my TikTok. And no, actually, maybe it been Instagram, but it was the story of, this idea of you can't self-diagnose, or the criticism that there is out there. And it was this guy, and he was like, what people think we're doing when we diagnose ourselves as autistic. And he held up a phone and he sort of said, haha, I kind of do that. Maybe I'm autistic. And then he said, what really happens? And he looks at, you could tell he's looking at several videos, and he's like, wait a second, I do that. Wait a second, I do that. And then it shows him going down the rabbit hole of internet research, and then buying the books, and then all these things. And then he's like, I think I might be, right? So it was telling the story of, and one of sort of of how he came to this. And one of the things that he said that struck me in there, when he was sort of like, wait a second, I did that, is he said, doesn't everyone do that? And that really struck me because, you've heard me say it on this show before, that we're only in our own brains. So the idea that others don't experience the world like our brains experience the world, especially if you are neurodivergent, but maybe low needs, that once you realize that you have this difference, you start to look back on your life and go, oh, wait a second. And I think for me, it has shown up as some grief and some reflection on how I know I've disappointed people. Like, I know one of the things we talked about is I'm very much like, if you're on my calendar, if you're on my conveyor belt, we're there, right? Like I get, you're right there. But I was talking about a friend of mine I've had, and I realized we have not talked in like 15 years. But I very much, and social media has been a part of this culprit, I very much know what's happening in this person's life. I visualize that we're friends, but I wonder, if I were this person's neurotypical, if I would go to them and say, hey, I've been thinking about you, blah, 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 if they would look at me and say, you haven't talked to me for 15 years. We're not friends. And here's the thing, that the grief part of that puzzle, there's two pieces of it. One is that I know I've done it to my family. And ironically, or not, so maybe, or just coincidentally, I don't know the right word, I watched my dad do it to the family too. So
I'm going to stop you. I'm curious. In watching your dad do it,
I didn't know it at the time.
Well, has he done it to you?
I'm not going to answer that one.
Okay.
That's a very complicated question. But I can tell you that when we would go visit my family in Texas, they would be like, well, you guys are hardly ever here, but man, when you're here, you're great. Like, I would hear things from like aunts and uncles, like, I thought you were stuck up, but now that you're here, you're fine. And so, and all of those stories being made about us, I know, all those stories being made up about us were in the absence of us showing up and being there, right? So, and I've very much love my family. I love my cousins. I love these people. There's no malice. There's no like, I just, when I'm in my day to day, and this is what's hurtful, I think, to people, they don't occur to me. Flat out. It's a blindness, it's a whatever, they don't occur to me. I think my mother chases me to talk to me more than I chase her. I think that hurts her feelings a little bit, although my mother understands me. I think with friendships that happens. I think that, yeah, I don't know, but I think that I think the lack of closeness, the always feeling like I'm an outsider, the never feeling like I can really get close to anybody is all of this neurospicy stuff. And I think that
As a protection, not getting close, or just a
no,
wiring thing. Yeah.
yeah,
What's not in front of her, she forgets about.
Yeah.
So then the connection
That for me, that's
for others.
plants. That's I neglect
like
plants.
like actual plants.
Yeah, I can't for some reason.
We used to joke about my parents. We have one parent, their flavor of neurodivergence is if you're not in front of them, they forget you. And the other parent is um, if you're not in front of them, they think about you a lot and imagine your absence and take account of it and reach out and are constantly trying to create that connection. So when our parents divorced, if you were with the one who was forgot you unless you were with them, you also had the other parent reaching out and or thinking about you, and you'd come home to all kinds of presents and what have you. And the kid who was with the parent who was always thinking about the other kid, if you were with them, they didn't pay attention to you. You were just background. Very interesting to
Well,
have
and when you think about like
such difference.
in terms of how lives go, at least in America, it's like when you're in school, you're with people all the time. When you're in college, you're with people all the time. And then once college ends or whatever, and then I was I was essentially in I worked for two theaters, so we were with people all the time. And then once I had kids and I left LA, and you know those things changed. And that's also I think when a lot of the, especially through perimenopause, when a lot of this started to catch up with me.
Um, that's interesting for like I have I think I developed this need for validation early because I think, in grade school, knowing that I was like, something's up. Like these, all these people are reading way faster than I am, or like they're in this group and they're on violet and I'm on brown still, as far as all the reading stuff. And like, what's happening? What's going on? Why is this harder for me type thing? And then I think, so you start developing the limiting beliefs and kind of the insecurities and whatnot. And then, so I so that's the ADHD, the executive functioning and not being able to keep up in class with, or being a more challenging. And then so what develops from there? For me, it was probably like looking for validation in other ways. And so that's where I developed like the class clown thing, like getting validation, making people laugh. Oh, I'm getting attention this way. Um, but it was, and then there's the people pleasing component that started going. It's like, okay, so the need for friends, the need to have a lot of friends, and the need to not disappoint any of those friends, no matter how they really mattered to me. Sometimes like a friend wasn't as meaningful to me, I would try extra hard to make sure that we were friends so that they wouldn't think of me in a certain way. And so I'm ruminating on this stuff, through like high school. Like if I'm not going out on a Friday night, I'm feeling depressed. I'm actually feeling depressed. Um, and I'm thinking about like conversations I had or interactions I had and like um why would someone be mad at me or what I need to do to make sure that they still like me. So I would think on it quite a bit. And I think the mask, what the clown mask or whatever it is, just kind of the entertaining, like it wasn't like Chris Farley level, where it's just like I'm the life of the party all the time, but it was very much like um you know the entertainer, just like, and so um as I after my and part of this is age, but I mean after my diagnosis and after kind of learning about those things that I just described, my need for it has gone way down. My need for the people pleasing, my need to have all the friends, like my 40th birthday party, I invited everybody I ever met, and then my 50th, it was like just my family, and again, I think part of that is age, but it like my need for it is not as strong.
Well, don't
Like
you
I
also find that I mean, I just like any other recovery, whether it's your drinking or whatever, I think our recovery from masking,
yeah.
we just didn't have, I don't think we had the language before to say, hey, I'm masking out. That's what I'm doing. I'm out there masking. But Greg and I were talking about this today because, I've watched him in his job as a worship leader at the church where, coming home after a Sunday and, or in the afternoon and having like doing things. Lately, he is exhausted. And I know it's because he is heavily masking at church.
Mm, mm-hmm.
Um, to be kind, to be people pleasing. He's in leadership, like to like sing the songs or whatever. And it's not like he masks because it's an awful situation. That's not it.
Right.
Just that's what you just sort of have to do in the world, right? And that's especially in a job like that. And he just lately, in the last year or so, comes home and is just tanked. So it really does. I there was a post on an Instagram that I responded to where they talked about specific anxiety as opposed to generalized anxiety. And
Hmm.
I answered it and I said, I definitely have that. I have specific anxiety. I'm not afraid to leave the house. It's not like I'm agoraphobic. It's not like I can't go shopping. I can't do these things. I can't do small group things with my friends. But when there is something that there's like out in the world that I know I'm going to be heavily masking to get through it, I do have to now do a cost benefit analysis on whether I want to attend or be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah.
Yes, and yes, and yes. I don't even know where to start. Like I'm having a funnel moment where like there's all these balls and I can't get any of them out. But the first thing I would say is, Michael, to what you were saying, there's a level of observation of self that feels so good and takes away a lot of that. So those feelings of so you talked about being ADHD and all these symptoms of needing friends and needing validation. I need Friday night frickin' plans. I'm 18. I need Friday night plans. I'm 22. I need Friday night plans. I'm 28. I need plans so that I feel good and have that, I have a kid who just got diagnosed with ADHD. And one of the questions was, do you have a big circle of friends? Do you sometimes sacrifice things that you as a person need to get done to satisfy group dynamics or to pull together groups? And so do you preference the group at the expense of self every day, all day long? And literally, since being told this, it's very easy to redirect that kid.
Hmm.
And I'm not doing it. That kid's redirecting. That kid is going, huh, I feel this pull to go do the group at the expense of self, but I know the self needs sleep, grocery
Amazing.
shopping, finish this assignment, whatever it is. And just the process of observing that, knowing that that's part of how their brain works, allows the release to be like, okay, psst, pressure release. And now I'm going to
Interesting.
take care of self, much like you were just describing the exact same thing for you.
But
Like
that was spelled out for them, correct? Like they like that
diagnosed, just
that
like you, when you
information was
had a,
like, here's this is like almost like a diagnosis, or like here's what could be happening. What do you think? And then
well,
they were like, well,
here,
yeah.
are these behaviors happening for you? Yes. Or what sounds true to you? Kind of like what Krista was describing. They're scrolling through and being like, yep, that's me. Yep, that's me. Wait, not everybody's like this. So to have that mirror back at self that says, this is what I'm seeing from you. This is what I'm seeing from you. This is what I'm seeing from you. It kind of doesn't matter if anybody else is doing it. That's what your brain is doing. How do you cope with that? How can you maximize that? How can you let the stress of that go? And this almost gets me back to that menopause thing that I've been talking about, which I swear I feel so grateful for my hot flashes. They are not predictable in terms of it's not adrenaline, it's not those other things. It's crap that me as a little organism, it bothered me a long time ago. So did I tell you guys I got an email inviting me to a group of women who I know tangentially? And my first thought was, and the description of the event was all of my bucket item things I love. But within 30 seconds, I got a hot flash. And so I closed it and I was like, oh God. So I'm being invited to something I love with a group of women I think I like, but I'm having a hot flash. What's going on? And I did some digging and I realized how I had first met these women was a PTSD moment for me. They've long forgotten it, or if they did, they thought I did beautifully. But I, from the inception of this group, have this PTSD moment. So I've just been observing it and I still haven't decided whether I'd like to go, but I'm not sure that it's going to be good for
Oh,
me.
interesting.
So I'm
So,
observing myself some more, and I might observe myself right past the due date of the RSVP. But
so I have a question because, and Sarah, you still haven't given us a childhood thing yet, but
no, I have a ton of those, but it's all
is
proof I'm
any,
autistic.
I
Tags and
guess, is anybody else feeling a sense? I mean, because regret is not the right word. I don't regret my past. I want to be very clear about that. I had a lovely childhood. I don't regret. It's not regret, but I do still find myself washed over at times with sadness
Mm, hmm.
that because I wasn't diagnosed or because I didn't know who I was, that I probably hurt people.
oh,
And
for sure.
that is
Fuck, I fucking
something
that. Oof, bad words. Sorry.
constantly. Oh, why are you saying sorry to say bad words? We're okay. This is an
Well,
adult show.
because that harms some people too.
Oh,
It's an
well.
analogy. That was an analogy, but never mind. I'll be quiet.
But well, I cuss on this show all the time. So if I'm hurting people and we don't have listeners, it's my fault. I'll just add it to
No,
the
I
list.
don't mean it like that.
But I have a lot of yeah, I have a lot of sadness at times around that piece of the puzzle.
And that's different than shame, would you say? Or is that
I don't have, I don't know. Again, like I have a brain that delineates that. I had someone question me online. They were like, isn't it the same thing if you have, whether it's specific anxiety or generalized anxiety, since you have anxiety, therefore you have anxiety. So who the fuck cares? And I was like, well, no, I care because my brain doesn't delineates it differently. And I would say I don't have anything to feel shame over. My
sure?
brain is my brain. My brain has, all of our brains have beautiful aspects to them. Um, I think my sadness is that, that there are people in the world who were in relationship with me who probably wonder what happened when I disappeared. And there's probably some stuff to clean up there, but I don't even know what it is. Or,
Can't you just ask? Can't you reach out to
I
them?
don't even remember some of them, Sarah. Like I can see images of stuff in my past, but I don't always remember the names of people. But I mean, it is a very bizarre thing to have a brain that can release things so completely, but knows that there's still echoes of pain there.
I guess the reason I mentioned,
And I don't want to go on a this is our life, this is your
no, I was
lifestyle
actually trying to
apology tour either.
be more global about it. Like, I think, and I was trying to be Socratic. I want you to come up with this conclusion, but I think that every time I try to ask it, it seems
Yes.
like I'm asking you to dig deeper into those hard feelings. That's
Yeah.
not it. I think you're making assumptions about people's pain. And maybe they do have it, but I
Maybe.
think that it's back to the observation. And what I take away from all of this is how what my sadness is about is, yes, I absolutely harmed people because I wasn't owning my slosh or knowing myself to set appropriate boundaries. I set them in funky ass ways and hurt people.
Yeah.
All of that's true. But the only thing I can change is me and my experience and then that impacts how I show up. So
Sure.
what I really have grief about is, have I given myself cancer being so stressed out about masking all this time instead
Oh,
of,
I think about that too.
I mean, not really. Yes, I'm not going to perseverate about that because
Yeah.
that'll create more stress. In fact, what can I want to just observe myself. And wow, that,
Yeah.
like, whenever I get these hot flashes and I'm like, whoa, that bothers me as
Yeah.
an organism. Let me just sit with why maybe I'm hungry, maybe I'm thirsty, maybe I'm tired, maybe I don't know, maybe I didn't touch grass enough today. And you can use that as a slur, but I'm going to use it as an opportunity. Yep, you're right. I'm going to go touch some grass. Like, I don't
Yeah.
need to fight any of this. I can just observe it and move on. And
And
sometimes, like we talked earlier about, I'm going out of country. Do I need to be a little bit more cautious? I'm not talking put my head in the sand and just observe me and
oh,
oops,
right.
they stopped me at the border. It's about, like, I'm not going to be a
I hope
martyr,
not.
but
Um,
I do want to take all of it as just this is the vista in front of me now.
I think that is a very evolved and lovely and beautiful space to be. And
And I'm not there all the time, just so you know. I'm trying.
I'm not actually in that space all the time of looking back and wondering
Mhm.
and it maybe it, and it's also maybe beyond a wondering in the sense that I don't think that I am as capable as others for deep relationship. Flat out.
I don't know that I believe you. I feel like I'm in a deep relationship with you. I've seen you put up walls, but typically they only happen when we're live because, you respect the boundaries of the other deep relationships that I see you have.
Yeah. Well,
So,
it's just an interesting thing.
I mean, but yeah,
I sort of always feel like there's this like web of computer generated like in between me and others no matter what. And maybe that's just the way that is. But it is an
I mean, that
interesting
could
thing.
be, but that's all of
But that could be everybody.
the
I'm not in
filters,
anybody.
right? I mean, that's the personas and the maybe do we really have like a pure, I mean, I guess we're capable of pure, authentic, unfiltered response to things. But most of the time there is some sort of persona that shows up, isn't there? Like, and that could be
Yeah,
that
I
digital
think
thing you're
though,
talking about.
it's really interesting though, because I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not in anybody else's brain. And since we've been doing all of this, I do think that I have these times where I will go in, like when I teach or whenever I just automatically say now, this is sort of how my brain works. And so I want you to know if I say something that is really direct, that it is really coming from love and improvement. And if it hurts your feelings, let's talk about it. But that I want you to assure you that that's not where this is coming from. Like I do a lot of setup now
How great.
for people to understand where I'm coming from. And 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 I don't know, maybe it's great, but also
I
maybe
think
I
so.
have to do a lot of extra work.
Well, but I mean,
Others who just don't are
those
normal and don't do those
relationships,
things.
you've communicated, you've put those things out there, and it's not like, um, a one-way relationship. Like this is the way it is, so deal with it. It's like, hey, here's here's the way I understand that how I come across. Or and it and I think having that be out there as a known, people aren't gonna they'll take your feedback
Well, and
differently.
I wish, I mean, listen, most people, a lot of people who are on some level of ADHD, I don't think know it. I just had a full conversation with someone about someone else's ADHD when I know full well that they have a lot of ADHD, which
Spot
is,
it, got it, y'all. Spot it, got it.
so I
And
was
in
like,
fact, if you're really annoyed by ADHD traits in others, odds are high you have ADHD and you don't
That's
but
accept
I
it.
really
have
funny.
I have entered into this space,
Interesting.
Michael, and because I think it was a vision that you had early on, and I think it is starting to happen maybe singularly with all of us, and eventually maybe we can corral it. But I have entered in this space where people have started to come to me and say, I have an employee, I've got a coaching situation, I think this person is neurodivergent. Can you help me navigate it? Which I find really interesting. And but I think that for many who have ADHD, again, I can only speak to myself. I don't have any shame around the fact that I'm neurodivergent. I actually have a lot of pride in it. I do have some shame of how I behaved before I knew it. And again, listen, we all have younger years. Even if you're not neurodivergent and you just were a stupid kid, we all have stuff from the past. I get it. But I wish that those with ADHD had and maybe it's going to shift and turn more than what I've seen, could get a handle of the tools to be able to talk about it without some of the other stuff, whether it's worry that you're not like there's a layer there that doesn't, I think, exist as much with the autism piece of the puzzle.
Let me,
That I wish y'all could be as direct because I think it'd be such a relief to say,
yes,
hey, this is
my,
how I move through the world.
I have a thought on that. And it kind of goes to when before a diagnosis, we're kind of, we have figured out through just self-awareness that something's up with the way our brain works. And um, it can lead to insecurity and low confidence and just worry about that we're not normal. And for me, it took a while to come to terms with my ADHD affected, let's just say, my non-ADHD partner in negative ways. And whether it was, the impulsivity or um, the way I would react to things, being defensive. So like along with the people pleasing thing, I think in that time in my life also started developing these protectors, and I wouldn't want anyone to make me feel less than.
Mm.
And so things would but the protectors would start kind of fortifying the walls, right? And if someone came at me where I was like, well, that's criticism or that's judgment, then I would get defensive, passive aggressive, mean, sarcastic, because the protector would be like, we're not going to let us feel like this.
Sure.
And so I think it took me a while to become not only really acknowledge that within myself that that's what was happening. That's where that reaction was coming from. Um, but it requires a certain amount of vulnerability, and vulnerability is scary to to anybody really. But it's just
Sure.
like really scary to those protectors that have spent decades,
Protecting you.
from the criticism and all that stuff. So for us to be like own our shit and say like, hey, you know what? If I get a little defensive or if I get flooded or irritated, here's what's going on. Because the way my brain works, it's, I might get flooded and this is how it's going to come across. I mean, that's kind of we don't want to admit any kind of shortcoming because we're already having this insecurity going on that we haven't maybe come to, what is it, having a reckoning with that. So I think there is I think I think that is the goal, Krista, to do that. I'm just kind of my experience in why that is hard, or why that was hard for me to get to that place. It took a while, but it is necessary. And I was talking to someone today. I was like, you know, all these little things I'm
Oh
doing.
no, who's doing the thumbs up? Look what is happening.
It keeps coming. But
Trying to get it to work, it doesn't.
I said,
Fine.
ADHDers, and I guess with any neurodivergence it's like the self-awareness piece is huge. The diagnosis, the self-awareness, learning the tools, but you also have to take into consideration, how is that impacting? And in this case, I said the non-ADHD partner. We shouldn't be like, well, let's all be really careful about how we're coming across to the neurotypical people. But I mean, we do need to understand that, and I think be responsible for, if my defensiveness or sarcasm or passive aggressiveness is hurtful to somebody, once I understand where that comes from and why, it doesn't happen as much.
Mhm.
Full
But
circle.
Krista, I think you still need, but I do agree with what you're saying as far as like having some ownership with it and communicating that.
I
It's
just
hard
find
though,
that
because
I'm consistently, for those who I know who have pretty much just the ADHD, I'm just constantly saying, why don't you just, and this is that disconnect between us. Like, why don't you just say, hey, listen, hey, I just want you to know, I have ADHD, and the way that might show up, or the things I might need to support it, are X, Y, and Z. And I know Michael's smiling like, how? Yeah, it sounds so easy. But I'm always encouraging them, because I think there's so much more grace out there if people know. Like, there's
yeah,
just is. And the other thing is that I saw, I'm going to bring this up right at the very end. There's new studies coming out that show that autism and ADHD are actually much closer, than what anybody has thought before.
One day I'm autistic, the next day I'm
Yeah,
ADHD.
that
It's totally that.
umbrella. Now
And yeah.
but they have been able to say that there are plenty of people with ADHD who have no autism. That is like, which is what you're experiencing, Michael. But they're also saying that people who are on the autism spectrum almost always have elements of ADHD. So it is, those things are starting to, come out as being closer. So anyway, I just hope that, there's more people out there now, and so I hope it is something easier to talk about. Yeah, we have
yeah,
about a
So
minute left, or we
to
could go
wrap
long.
it up, I actually have a point that does this, I think. When you start your sessions, Krista, by saying, this is how my brain works, and saying that, you are explicitly, and I've said this before, but I want to just really lay this out there because of what Michael said, and I'll tie it together. Explicitly calling out, you're giving permission explicitly for other types of brains to exist.
mm,
So while, the closer that we can relate to ourselves, the closer relationship we have with ourselves, which starts with that observation, both by us and maybe by a psychiatrist or our friends or TikTok, that's like, so we're observing ourselves in relation to others, in relation to the world, to all of this. And the closer and more willing we are to not react, but just observe ourselves, the more we're able to then be close to others and get closer to them. So when you start off with this is how my brain works, that's an invitation to hear how other people's brains work. And to
mm,
Michael's point, if I hear, hey, another person is how I am, it creates kind of this safe place for me to be that way too. So it isn't immediate. I know it's a hard thing to be like, hey, this is how my brain works, and then launch into it. But the more we do it, the closer we get to each other and to ourselves and kind of all of that, and away from passive aggressive, which doesn't feel good, and other dysfunctional coping skills that actually cause us to take on stress
yeah,
instead of just offload it. Just to love,
Well,
it
and
sounds so
what
easy, and I know
I
it's
know.
not as easy as
Well, I think it's easier the more you do it, because at first it was
Yes.
harder for me, and the more I do it now, it's just the way I move through the world. But I will say one last thing is like what it doesn't, and this is one of those things that my kids were taught, when they were younger, which is questions like when you can tell someone's being is sort of getting overstimulated, is like, what does your brain need right now?
Mm.
And what I think
That's a
it
good
does is it hopefully what I wish is that when people I love who have ADHD are out in the world and are clearly becoming overstimulated, Love on the Spectrum has a beautiful, if the new season's out if you haven't seen it, but it has a beautiful example of this. One of the guys, he gets overstimulated, and the girl he's dating, she's delightful. Her name's Georgie, and she just looks at him. She said, "It's okay. What do you need?"
Wow.
And I do think that there's something to that. Instead of going like, having all of our isms bounce off of each other, it's like, oh, Michael just got, sarcastic, so now I'm just going to get sarcastic back. And like, to sort of go like, I see you're dysregulated. What does your brain need right now? I mean, I'm not there quite yet, perhaps, but I
Called
think that's the
co-regulation.
goal.
Yeah.
Oh, girl, that's my sweet spot. Co-regulation. That's like a dirty word. Girl. All right. On that note,
Say it in a deep voice, Michael, before she goes.
Co-regulation.
oh, I thought you wanted me to say it in a deep voice. Co-regulation.
All right, people.
That's been another hour of your time because we went long.
That's right.
Ooh.
Michael, you're going to take us out on a real note?
Yeah. Well, yes. So Sarah, it was you show me yours, I'll show you mine. Was that the kind of the catchphrase?
What we kind of did, didn't we?
Yeah, like just doing that little dance.
We're co-regulating, y'all.
Co-regulation, I think, is the key. I appreciate the discussion. That was another episode of This Is How My Brain Works. Please like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you on the next one. If you like this episode of This Is How My Brain Works, please like, subscribe, and share. If you'd like more info on the hosts, guests, and topics, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening.